January 6th for me started before January 6th because we've had problems with election fraud for years. Um, it wasn't that long ago that the Democrats were talking about election fraud, and we've known about problems with voting machines for years. And so I just wasn't playing the game when it wasn't fair. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. It may not be the best decision to have chosen not to um, not to be voting, but that's just where I was for years. And then when it came to Trump's second term, the option with Biden and Harris was so terrifying to me, um, that I just thought I don't care if it's game or not. I have to go vote. Um, we're coming through COVID, and I was scared of what was going to happen with our medical rights. And in my state, we were very draconian in COVID. They were telling us who could work and who couldn't work. And the restrictions were ridiculous. And I'd become active with protests throughout COVID. And agree with it or not, I refused to mask, and I refused to let the government tell me what I was going to inject into my body when I didn't trust it. Yeah, yeah, a lot of us didn't. It was very questionable. And so, to that election, that election was so clearly stolen. In the state of Pennsylvania, we went to bed knowing that Trump had won, and then we woke up and it was Biden. Like, how did that happen overnight? It was shocking. It was truly shocking. It was almost like a slap in the face to Pennsylvania is how in our face it was. And then they just kept repeating that it's a big lie. It's a big lie. And they didn't want to talk about the facts and the things that we saw and the things that we experienced and the numbers. And they just kept repeating that it was a lie, and we knew it wasn't. I mean, in this state, we had Amish people going out to vote. Amish people don't even go out to vote, and it was just such a massive turnout. Um, and so when the president called for people to go to Washington, D.C., to me, after all these years, I'm just like, finally, okay, we're going to talk about the election fraud because it needs to be spoken about. Excuse me. And so I was so happy to go to that rally. Um, and not just for the election fraud part of it either. When you go to these rallies and these protests, it's not like an angry place. You go to these things and there's an air of festivity, and you meet the most amazing people that are just wanting to see America become great, and they have genuinely good motives, and it's always a good feeling. People want to air or think of protests as being a bad thing, but the reality is they've become almost festive. And so when I went to the Capitol on January 6th, that's what I expected was it to be like another one of those protests. And throughout COVID, I knew my rights with protesting because we were going to our county courthouse every single week. Every single Saturday, we were gathering at our courthouse protesting what was happening in our state with COVID. And so I had spoken to my borough, and I knew what it took with like getting permits and permission, and not blocking traffic and all of that. And so at the Capitol that day, I could barely see Trump speaking. He was like this little blip on a screen way far away from me. And so I just thought I'm going to walk up to the Capitol and watch the people roll in. And of course, we're going to probably do some chanting and meet some really awesome people. And so that's what I did. I left before Trump was done speaking. And so that put me at the Capitol before a lot of other people. I was at the very front of the people there. And the barricades were still up around the Capitol on what I would call the violent side, but it wasn't violent yet when I got there. There was cops not even in riot gear, but then officers went up on the balcony on the second story and they started shooting down into the crowd at us. I mean, it was literally like click, 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 and just sweeping back and forth through the crowd. And in those temperatures, what should have been rubber bullets were like rocks. And so when they hit people, um, people were dropping to the ground. There was a guy beside me. I know his name now is Joshua Black. I didn't know him at the time, but I could look through his cheek because he had been shot in the face. And from there, it just escalated. We were confused. We didn't understand why they were shooting us. I heard grown men begging police officers to stop. For me, um, I stayed there because I knew it was a public sidewalk. Like I said, I know my rights with protesting. This is a public sidewalk. I'm allowed to be here. The police can abuse me if they want, but I really just expect them to, if they want to, they can arrest me and then they can let me go the next day. I mean, this is Washington, D.C. They have protests and rallies every day. This shouldn't be anything different, but it was just confusing. And then it escalated. And as some of the people were met with violence, some of the people did become violent. When you see an American citizen, or especially if it's a woman or an elderly person, being attacked by an officer, some people can't handle that. And I mean, rightfully so. Is it right to be able to handle that? And so the barricades were removed. And this is where I would say, if I'm going to be guilty of something, this is where I become guilty, because I didn't stay on a public sidewalk then. I went up onto the balcony and I was witness to those glass doors being broken in what they call the tunnel. And then I was witness to another window being broken beside the tunnel. And then there was a man pile at the tunnel where the police, I don't know if they put off an irritant to cause people to need to evacuate the tunnel and then they were stumbling out of it and falling on each other, or if somebody fell and the police just kept pushing each other. But I do remember the crowd actually chanting, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," because there was people at the bottom crying for help, and I could hear Roseanne Boylan's voice crying for help at the bottom of that pile. And so we're pulling people out of this pile that's just an incredibly tight pile. I mean, people just stuck in there. Um, a woman screaming for her child. She can't find him. Somebody stuck in the pile just by his shoe, where it took me and another grown man to pull him out, even though he's only in the pile from his ankle down. That's how tight it was. And by the time we get to the bottom, there's Roseanne Boylan and she's dead. And I'm looking at her like, I know CPR, I can save her. And I'm also thinking in the back of my mind how, first of all, she's dead. Second of all, this is extremely violent. Third of all, we knew somebody else had been shot. Some woman somewhere in the Capitol had been shot. And now I know that she's Ashley Babbitt. But at the time, all we knew was somebody had been shot. And it wasn't like a protester shooting somebody. Like somebody had been shot um, by our authorities. And so it was not a place I wanted to be. And I feel guilty because I did not stay there and give Roseanne CPR. Instead, I went and I broke a window on the other side of the tunnel. And in my mind, I know that it's illogical, but I thought I was on some level helping. I mean, these people were get in this building and going in this tunnel, people are just dying. And I did. I broke a window, and not very long later, after that window was broken, I snapped out of it. They threw a bunch of, I think they're called flashbangs, where it was just like boom, 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 boom. And all of this gas came out and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't see and my eyes just wouldn't stay open. And it just like snapped me out of it. Like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be. You got to get out of here. And so I did. I took off out of there. And I went back to the place I was staying for the night in town. And it was unreal. I mean, that day it felt like it felt like war. Like I felt like I was in war, but I didn't go to the Capitol with that intent. And it was like living moment to moment that day. There was no plan. And so then, the media started talking about us and showing media, just like clips in the media. And they portrayed us as these violent insurrectionists. And if we had planned to go there that day and take the Capitol, and we had planned an insurrection, that would not have taken all day. We'd have been in that building, so it's the most ridiculous thing they could have portrayed us as, and yet the American people, they just bit into that hook, line, and sinker, and they just ran with it. And they believed it. And a lot of people at the beginning turned their backs on us. There was a lot of good people that they stood behind us, but then and a lot of other people were just terrified. They were so scared of their own government when they started seeing them come after us, that people basically went off the charts, almost like went into hiding. They're not participating in their groups anymore. They're just like silent. Um, and I knew that it was it was going to be really bad when people started sending me FBI BOLO posters, which is, it's not like a warrant out for your arrest. It's just a poster that says, we want information on this person. And so when that started happening and a reporter from the New York Times started coming around, um, I was just like, I need legal help and I need it right now. And so I did. I went and I got a lawyer and retained it with help of my friends. I mean, you figure at this point, it was just me living with a bunch of kids. It's not like I'm a rich person. And so my friends helped gather the money for that retainer. And um, then my lawyer contacted DC, and the same time he contacted DC, they put a warrant out for my arrest. And so I turned myself in. I had to drive back. I had driven across the state to get help. And so they wanted me to go back to where I came from and turn myself in. And I did. And that same day, they also did a raid on my house. And thank goodness I had the forethought that my children were at home and that I was taking care of business. So I wasn't home. Um, it's just incredible to me. How can they plan a raid on your home that nobody is supposed to know about? And yet there's a news media helicopter flying over my house during the raid, getting footage of somebody's house that's a January 6th person. And so I think back on things like that, and it makes me think of how much of an entrapment it was, because I really do feel like I feel like I played a fool by not going there that day, thinking that something could be planned for us. And I feel like I just fell into this. And it is what it is. And from there, I really thought the judicial system would help us, and it didn't. I really thought our representatives would help us, and most of them did not. Um, I didn't realize that the justice system is so inaccessible to your average person and how little help there is in it. I didn't realize that as an American, I could be held in my home for literally years awaiting trial and have it not count towards my sentencing. I literally could not walk out into my yard. I could not go to the grocery store. I could not go get a haircut. After a while, they wouldn't even let me go out to work. I had to move my office into the place where I was living. The expenses got so bad, I sold my house to pay for my legal bills. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to at least try a public defender. And then the court started charging me for a public defender because I had sold my house. Well, what if I want my house when I'm done with this, And so they wouldn't even take that into context. And it was a real struggle. Thank goodness for people that just rallied around me and not just lifted me up in prayer, but also helped me raise some funds. And I personally, one of my favorite people is Cynthia Hughes with the Patriot Freedom Project, because she really stepped in. She came to my house, was not my house. She came to the place where I was living after I sold my house, and she met my family. And then she helped me find a lawyer who had had a big win on that 1512 obstruction charge. So she just really set me up, and she helped me pay some of my retainer fees with him, and that was a huge blessing. And then she had my kids meet Trump, not once but twice, and that was like such a boost for my family. And I got I gained so much respect for Trump during that time because, I'd been calling my representatives, I'd been asking them for help, and none of them would come see me, even in my local area. My local representative, Mike Kelly, that office gave me the suicide hotline when I called them for help. Which was a real slap in the face. I'm like, I need help. I don't need the suicide hotline. I need you to do your job and care about America and make sure that this does not happen again. And yet here's President Trump, who's running for office, and he takes time off of his campaign trail to meet children of January 6th defendants multiple times. And he took them into a room. I couldn't go because I was on house arrest. Um, but he, at his golf course in New Jersey, he took them aside into a private room, and he encouraged them, and he signed hats for them. And he promised them, you just got to hang in there. I'm going to help your parents. And we knew that if he was going to get in, that he was going to put us. We knew it the whole time. Even though there's that thought, like, is the election going to get stolen again? It still had like this glimmer of hope that it was going to be okay, because after I took my bench trial and I was convicted, they gave me a 57-month sentence and $8,000 in fines for what should have been a misdemeanor. The window that I broke was $600 window. That's a misdemeanor charge, but they threw all of these other charges in with it, 3 felonies and six misdemeanors. And one of those felonies got thrown out later by the Supreme Court, where they're like, you can't use this on January 6th people, and it was just incredible to be so overcharged in America, and to see the justice system weaponized against us. And then when they threw me into prison after the 3 years of this strict house arrest, which, I mean, I missed my daughter's wedding. I missed the births of two of my grandchildren. Um, my family was basically on house arrest with me. I had a teenage son that he just wanted to play football in the worst way, and yet I couldn't even I couldn't get him to sports. So they're locked up with me. My whole family is suffering. I didn't just sell my family home. I sold my kids' family home, and then they put me in prison in the worst female facility in the United States, at Hazleton in West Virginia. Um, it's literally the worst one. If they just put my name in, rachelpowell.com or .org, I have a website with a link that will go there. That's really the easiest way, is just to know my name. And so I'm just back on Facebook. I'm just back on Instagram. I said I would never go back to those platforms again because they gave me the boot before I had even turned myself in. I was like, I'm never going back, never going to do it. And yet here I am, like literally just this month, I'm back on those. So they can find me there, and I'm going to start making some videos. And so they'll be able to find me on YouTube and Rumble. I journaled my whole year in prison. Every single day I wrote down, I journaled. And so as I start typing out my journaling paperwork, I'll probably be making videos and sharing my experiences there. So people really might want to find me, because it should be interesting and eye-opening for them. And as I go through my paperwork as well, I got all my legal documents sent back from prison, and so I have a lot of forms that I filed that I'll be able to prove that the BOP is not doing what it should, that they are interfering with the um, the grievance process. And anybody out there that really cares, they really want to know what's going on in the BOP, find me, follow me, because I'll be sharing that information as I go through it. And it's going to be slow going because there's just so much. And, I am going to be moving again. And, just there's life and work to be done. But I'm going to go through it and share.
Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.